For the mission, the squad would collectively prepare equipment, plan the mission, brief the mission, and rehearse their actions on target. This is what they would do if they had 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 hours, or in this case, about 8 hours. Sonny checked with each SEAL to confirm what weapon he would be carrying and began to set out ammunition, grenades, and special weapons systems accordingly. Since on this mission he would be engaged in room clearing rather than fire support, he would carry the lighter M46, a belt-fed 5.56 submachine gun. As the squad member tasked with air operations responsibility, he would also see that the parachutes were laid out and inspected along with the gear bags they would use in the jump. Ray, as the primary communicator, began work on the comm plan with primary and alternative frequencies. He would work closely with Lieutenant Engel to manage the on-call support assets and to monitor the command and control net. He also set up the tactical SEAL net, which would drive the flow of the operation on the ground. Part of Ray's job would be to ensure that each multi-band inter-squad team radio was inspected, encrypted, mated to a fresh battery pack, and fully tested. They would not have a dedicated sniper overwatch team for this mission, but Wymie would carry a suppressed Mk-12, a sniperized version of the M4 assault rifle that was sniper accurate for the ranges they'd be working. He, too, could be tasked with room-clearing duties, and the Mk-12, if a little long, would still serve in that role. But his primary job would be to kill quietly at a distance. There was little for Mikey to do, as each SEAL medical kit was up to date, as was his own squad medical bag, but he knew he would be responsible for tending to Morales and getting her ready for travel. He haunted the senior chief and Lieutenant Lyons for any updates on her condition. AJ was the squad point man. His job would be to take the team from the insertion point to the target, and from the target to the extraction point. Although the waypoints to the target and the extraction lanes would be GPS-driven coordinates and azimuths, he also needed to be able to find his way by compass and pace count should their GPS fail. For most of the afternoon, AJ pored over maps and imagery to establish insertion points, extraction sites, and alternative extraction sites. Nolan and Engel spent the balance of the afternoon reading intelligence reports and looking at imagery of the target. They focused on developing the plan of attack and the all-important actions on target. They'd done this many times before in Iraq and Afghanistan, but in the sandbox, they had 2 very distinct advantages. First, they were blessed with good intelligence on the opposition and precise, state-of-the-art targeting imagery. Second, there was always an overwhelming quick reaction force on standby if they got into trouble. On this mission, they had sketchy intelligence on the bad guys and the target area, and if they ran into problems, their contingencies were limited. They grabbed a quick MRE and worked into the evening. By 2200, they had constructed a reasonably accurate sand table terrain model of the target encampment, and what they hoped was the building where Morales was being held. Nolan stood back to inspect their work. "That's not great, boss, but it's probably as close as we're going to get." "I agree," Engel replied. "You never know enough, but in this case I'd sure like to know a hell of a lot more." Nolan shrugged. "In the end, it all comes down to the basics, the element of surprise and violence of action. If we get that, then we'll get this done. And God help us if for some reason they know we're coming." "Amen to that. You ready for operational briefing?" "As ready as I can be. Let's do it." 15 minutes later, the squad was assembled in the TOC. The senior chief and Lieutenant Lyons updated them on the intel picture. Then each member of the squad gave a short briefing on his area of responsibility. Engel then gathered them around the terrain model and walked them through their actions on target, what they planned for actions on target. After a short rehearsal behind the warehouse using an old shed as a target building, they began to gear up for the mission. At midnight, an MC-130H landed at the remote airstrip and paused to receive the squad of heavily armed SEALs. As they moved out onto the tarmac, Lieutenant Lyons stepped from the shadows. "Guys, I'll not be here when you get back, but I wanted to thank you for what you're about to do. Good hunting, and Godspeed." The SEALs clambered aboard yet another C-130 airframe, but this one was different. It was an MC-130H Combat Talon II, a special operations deep penetration bird. at more than 3 times the cost of a C-130H or one of the later variants. The Combat Talon had an electronic suite that allowed it to feel its way through commercial and military radar coverage to stealthily deliver its cargo. But for the guys in the back, the cargo, there was little discernible difference. It was still a 130. For this clandestine pickup, there was the noise of the aircraft coming and going, but no lights. It was a black operation, literally. As they gained altitude, Mikey, who was seated next to Engel, leaned close and shouted in his ear, "Hey, boss, me and the other guys have been talking. When we get back to Coronado, we're gonna get that guy." "What guy?" "The guy that gave you that fucked up haircut." Across the bay of the 130 and to either side, broad white smiles cut the blackened faces of the squad SEALs. A short time later, the drop aircraft approached the target at 22,000 feet, well above an altitude where some notice might be taken on the ground. The ramp door combination ground open, and the heavily laden SEALs shuffled to the rear, bunching up on the ramp. The smiles were gone. Now was the time for business. The red lights on either side of the ramp winked out and were replaced by green lights. The SEAL squad tumbled from the rear of the 130 as a single mass. As the SEALs tumbled into space over Costa Rica, 2 Sikorsky CH-53E Super Stallion Marine Corps helicopters sat turning on the massive flight deck of the USS Bonhomme Richard, LHA-6. The Bonnie Dick, as she was known in the fleet and by those who served on her, was a U.S. Navy big-deck amphibious ship steaming 50 miles off the coast of Costa Rica, 41,000 tons of versatile U.S. Navy expeditionary muscle. The Bonnie Dick had an impressive array of defensive armaments, as well as a wing of AV-8B Harrier II attack jets, a fleet of assault helicopters, and close to 2,000 Marines. The downdraft from the Super Stallion's 7-bladed rotors washed the ship's flight deck with gale-force winds as the Bird's pilots performed their final pre-launch checks. "Tower, Bulldog 6-1 and flight, ready to lift." "Bulldog 6-1 and wing, cleared to lift. Winds 18 knots on the nose and stay with me on this net. Roger, Tower." With that, both Birds lifted gently from the deck. The intensity of their downwash increased to hurricane force as they pulled into a hover. The Bulldog wingman, Bulldog 6-3, dipped his nose and thundered straight ahead into the blackness, the helos rotating red anti-collision beacons and tiny red, green, and white position lights providing the only light, save that of a full complement of stars overhead. Bulldog 6-1, the lead helo, slid smartly to the Bonhomme Richard's port side and remained in a hover, 60 feet above the black ocean below. Once in a stable hover, the big helo began to drift back to the port stern quarter of the Bonnie Dick. As Bulldog 6-3 turned lazy circles directly above the ship and 6-1 hovered, one of the 2 Special Operations Craft Riverine, or SOCR for short, was positioned on the aft portion of the Bonhomme Richard's flight deck. The flight deck drill this night was to hang a 36-foot, 14,000-pound combat craft from each helo. Inside each bird, a 5-man boat crew from Special Boat Team 22 looked on anxiously. For these highly trained Special Warfare Combatant Craft Crewmen, or SWCCs, this was high drama, and more than a little nerve-wracking. All they could do was watch as the 20-ton helicopter hovered over the beloved boat. Bulldog 6-1's pilot carefully lowered his hover to just 10 feet over the first SOCR combat craft. A flight deck crewman, in his yellow flotation vest and flight deck helmet, reached up with a long pole and attached the steel cable from the SOCR's boat harness to the large cargo hook on the underside of the Super Stallion. Once complete, the landing signals officer standing directly in front of Bulldog 6-1 raised his spread arms up and up again, signaling the pilot to lift his hover and accept his burden. Gradually, the Super Stallion took tension on the 4-point sling, and the SOCR was airborne. The Bulldog lead pilot, moving more carefully now that he had his cargo slung underneath and making small cockpit corrections, dipped the nose of the Super Stallion as he began to creep forward. Once through translational lift, he increased speed to 90 knots and took up position on the Bonhomme Richard's starboard side, orbiting in circles 500 feet above the Black Ocean. The Super Stallion and the SOCR now moved as one. With Bulldog 6-1's pickup complete, Bulldog 6-3's pilot spiraled down from 500 feet and followed the ship's wake until he was at Bonnie Dick's fantail. He then eased over and above the second SOCR boat. The pilots and crewmen on the deck completed the same maneuvers with the lead bird. Bulldog 6-3, mission ready and transitioning to forward flight, eased away from the Bonhomme Richard's port side. Thanks to the skill of the Marine pilots, the delicate maneuver had taken less than 15 minutes. Bulldog 6-1 in flight, you are cleared to switch control frequency, come up to 262.5 megahertz, and have a safe flight. Bulldog 6-1, roger, the lead pilot replied as he flew straight ahead, still at 500 feet. Within a minute, Bulldog 6-3 was formed up in loose cruise formation on 6-1's starboard side as the two Super Stallions turned gently east toward the west coast of Costa Rica. 45 minutes later, the two CH-53Es thundered over the treetops of the lush Costa Rican jungle, their slung matte gray SOCR boats conforming to their every move. They remained just above the treetops to avoid any commercial radar detection, and they showed no lights. The Marine pilots, relying on their helicopter night vision systems, their GPS navigation systems, and hours upon hours of night flight training, made their way precisely toward their insertion point with no ground reference points or electronic emissions. The two Super Stallions slowed as they found the river, Bulldog 6-3 pulling into loose trail behind his leader. Established in a hover over the wide river, the Super Stallion's pilots gently lowered the SOCR boats into the water. As they did, each boat's 5 SWCCs, with a great deal of relief, clambered down rope ladders into their boats. Once waterborne, they were back in their element. The boat guys, as their SEAL brethren called them, traced their routes back to the U.S. Navy torpedo boats of World War II. The SWCCs, called SWICs, could take the SEALs where deep-draft Navy ships couldn't, into shallow water and far up rivers like this one. The SOCRs drew just 24 inches. Their mission this night wasn't to deliver the SEALs to the fight, it would be to extract them. The coxswains gave their respective Super Stallions a thumbs up, and the birds' pilots cut the umbilical holding the boats underneath them. Their mission complete, the CH-53Es turned west toward the blue water, and their home plate, the Bonnie Dick. The boat crews immediately began to prepare their craft for high-speed travel into harm's way. The well-tested engines roared to life at the touch of the ignition. The coxswains then pointed their bows upriver, the engines at an impatient idle, and the two Hamilton water jets holding each craft steady against the gentle current. Each boat leader, a Navy chief petty officer, took charge of his boat and directed his small crew to armor up. The SOCR carried a formidable arsenal of 50 caliber machine guns, 40 millimeter grenade launchers, and 7.62 millimeter miniguns. Chief Ricardo Bautista, the officer in charge, or OIC, of the lead, or one boat, quietly barked orders to his crew. The noise of the departing helicopters marked their presence, but no use letting those who might be listening know there were North Americans on the river. "You know the drill, Wilson. I want the 50 cals fore and aft and the miniguns port and starboard." "Got it, Chief." "Bachman, have the grenade launchers at the ready in case we need them." "Roger that, Chief." There was a flurry of activity as both crews removed the weapon systems from their tied-down, stored positions and mounted them on their craft's gunnels and fixed stanchions. Heavy cans of ammunition were broken out and made ready. Neither boat showed a light as the crews went about their business in total darkness. There was the occasional flicker of a well-hooded red penlight. The SWICs knew their boats, and they knew their systems. On the lead SOCR, each crewman reported when he was up and ready. It was much the same on the two-boat. Bautista watched from his coxswain's flat, missing nothing. When all was ready, he pulled himself up to his full 5'8" and turned to the others. "Okay, guys, bring it in." His 4 SWICs collapsed in around the helm. "Now listen up. We got SEALs on the ground in bad guy territory. Our job is to extract them safely, and the recent intel says there's a good chance it'll be a hot extraction. Everyone, stay focused and stay professional. Call out your targets, do it just like you trained. There'll be bad guys out there as well as our SEAL brothers. Make damn sure of your targets, then bring the pain. Got it?" Bautista's crew nodded in unison. They got it. "2 boat, 1 boat, over," Bautista said into his encrypted lip mic. "2 boat here, manned and ready, over. Roger 2, stand by to get underway. 1 out." With that, Bautista slammed the SOCR's throttles forward, and the twin 440 Yanmar diesels went from their idle grumble to a full-on roar. First one craft, then the other, leapt up on step and roared up the river at 40 knots. The 2 boat followed 100 meters behind the 1, its crew undoubtedly motivated by a talk just like Bautista's. Their crews, all wearing the latest